Welcome to the latest episode of Let's Watch the Left Trip Over Their Feet, where Democrats prove yet again that no budget is too big and no outcome too ridiculous for them. Take Kamala Harris, for instance. Her team blew six figures to recreate an LA podcast studio in DC. And for what? A few cardboard walls and a vibe that screams, we spent way too much money to look this mediocre. Meanwhile, in Texas, Democrats are outraged that the census didn't magically hand them victories on a silver platter. This isn't just a comedy of errors. It's a party unraveling at the seams. While they're busy fantasizing about mangrove trees and green utopias, they've lost touch with regular working Americans. Meanwhile, Republicans are more than happy to pick up the pieces and the seats. But what about you? When was the last time the ruling class showed any concern about you and your rent prices skyrocketing, your grocery bills eating through your budget every week, while your paycheck feels stuck in the same place? Maybe you're juggling multiple jobs just to make ends meet, or feeling the weight of credit card debt piling up. Is anyone in Washington actually listening? Sure feels like when it comes to the regular Americans, our politicians seem more interested in being in the show rather than actually running it. Now, all that being said, our first clip comes courtesy of Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett from Texas's 30th District. Crockett, who seems to think fiery rhetoric is a substitute for actual solutions, is here to spin a tale of census conspiracies and Republican scheming. Let's hear what she has to say, though fair warning, it's about as grounded as a helium balloon.
Where we were talking about how many voters. Listen, when you're counting people, you're not just counting voters. You count children, don't you?
Correct.
You count a lot of people that aren't necessarily voters. And I want to make sure that we really get to the nitty gritty on Texas, because this is hilarious to me. Texas added 2 seats. In 2020, according to the census, and we know that there was a significant undercount, specifically in Texas for a combination of reasons, but we know that specifically Texas added 4 million people. Of those 4 million people, do you want to take a guess at how many were Anglos? Just a guess.
I'd say a majority.
180,000. That's it, of 4 million. 95% of the people that were added. And we know that when it comes to minority populations, they tend to be undercounted. So get this. We added 4 million people. They were people of color. Texas got 2 new seats. So they took those black and brown and Asian bodies, and guess what? Do you think that we got a new black, brown, or Asian seat? Somehow, the way that they do their Republican math in the state of Texas, that amounted to 2 new white seats. Guess what? White Republican seats. We got 2 new Republican seats out of 4 million people of color. So let me tell you, they love to use our bodies to apportion us in an inaccurate way.
Jasmine Crockett is more interested in delivering a soap opera than a civics lesson. Anyway, Crockett's argument is riddled with glaring rhetorical manipulations that collapse under scrutiny. What Crockett is actually complaining about isn't apportionment, it's redistricting. Yes, Texas's Republican-controlled legislature is responsible for drawing district lines, and yes, gerrymandering is a legitimate issue. But let's not pretend this is a uniquely Republican problem. Democrats in states like Maryland and Illinois are just as guilty of drawing heavily partisan maps to suppress Republican votes. The Brennan Center for Justice's 2022 report lays this out clearly. If Crockett truly cared about fair representation, she'd be championing independent redistricting commissions instead of peddling a half-baked accusation. And let's be real. If the goal was to give away seats to white Republicans, wouldn't there be actual evidence of such intent? Crockett provides none because it doesn't exist. She's conflating 2 entirely separate processes, apportionment, which is neutral and mathematical, and redistricting, which is political, and then spinning a narrative that's as hollow as it is inflammatory. It's the political equivalent of trying to pass off a vending machine snack as a gourmet meal. Anyway, in our next clip, we get more Jasmine. Hope it gets better.
Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy have left the Capitol, and their parting words were that they, quote, want to meet with Democrats next time. Would you meet with them?
Oh, I would meet. Now, I don't know that they want to meet with me, but I would absolutely, listen, if they are going to have this little Doge commission or whatever it is that they are calling, I absolutely want to understand as much about it as I can so that I can report back. It's kind of like that time that we had to go and see the January 6ers at the jail. I had to show up to make sure that the truth was going to be reported. So absolutely, come and see me, guys, and let's have a talk so I can make sure that the truth is in the atmosphere.
Apparently, Jasmine believes her presence alone ensures honesty in the atmosphere. Well, if that's true, the air quality is officially hazardous. Crockett has shown time and again that her version of the truth is about as solid as a sandcastle in a hurricane. Now, the irony isn't lost on anyone that Crockett is out here demanding to be seen as the ultimate fact checker, yet her own track record with the truth is, let's say, questionable. Whether it's baseless accusations, inflated rhetoric, or just outright nonsense, she's proven time and again she's more interested in playing a role than actually engaging with reality. If Musk and Ramaswamy ever do decide to come and see her, they'd better bring earplugs because all they're going to hear is more of the same empty noise. Speaking of noise, here comes Joy Reid.
We are seeing a global trend of the far right surging. It isn't just happening here. But let's bring you back to the U.S. and to our local gangster, Donald Trump. He's not even president yet, and he's already spending his time sitting in his golden palace, Mar-a-Lago, muscling other countries like he's Tony Soprano with a social media site. Doing things like, reportedly, debating whether or not to invade Mexico, threatening BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, with 100% tariffs if they don't commit to trading in dollars and not their own currencies, demanding Hamas release all hostages being held in Gaza before his inauguration, or there will be, quote, all hell to pay in the Middle East, even reportedly threatening Canada. According to Fox, when Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau went to Mar-a-Lago this weekend to try to talk Trump out of his 25% tariff threat, Trump apparently suggested that if Canada can't handle the tariffs that would violate the NAFTA upgrade Trump himself signed into law, the USMCA, they should just become the 51st state. Just become this 51st state instead and allow Trudeau to be reduced to governor of the state of Canada, which caused the Prime Minister and others to laugh nervously. And while some are writing that off as just a joke, just a few hours ago, Trump posted this obviously AI photo of him standing on a mountaintop next to the Canadian flag, looking off into the distance with the caption, "Oh, Canada." And for the record, he appears to be looking at the Matterhorn, which is on the border between Switzerland and Italy, not Canada.
Joy Reid's monologue is a masterclass in hyperbole and misrepresentation, but honestly, what else is new? First, her characterization of Donald Trump as a local gangster operating out of Mar-a-Lago is more like a bad fan fiction than actual analysis. Comparing Trump to Tony Soprano, please, Joy, this isn't The Sopranos, it's international diplomacy. Trump's tariff threats and dollar-based trade demands are standard practices in maintaining economic leverage, something every administration does. The Peterson Institute for International Economics has detailed how these tactics are commonly used to protect U.S. interests, but I guess that doesn't fit Joy's script. Maybe she should stick to binge-watching mob dramas instead of spinning them on air. Now, let's talk about her outrage over Trump muscling foreign nations for standing up for American interests. Joy, that's literally the job description of a U.S. president, to prioritize the country he represents. Advocating for fair trade agreements and promoting the dollar isn't muscling. It's ensuring that the U.S. remains competitive. The Council on Foreign Relations notes that these strategies are critical in countering China's growing economic influence, but Joy makes it sound like Trump's trying to shake down the BRIC nations with a baseball bat. At this point, you have to wonder, does she root for Team America or is her jersey conveniently reversible? And then there's her dramatic interpretation of Trump's jokes. When Trump quipped about Canada becoming the 51st state, even Justin Trudeau laughed nervously, but not Joy. Oh no, she takes it as a serious imperialistic threat. Joy, if sarcasm confuses you this much, maybe stick to monotone documentaries. Look, even Reagan once joked about bombing Russia during a sound check, and no one accused him of plotting world domination. But when Trump posts an "Oh, Canada" meme next to the Matterhorn, Joy acts like he's filing paperwork to annex the Great White North. If we're taking memes as policy statements, then I guess the entire internet is full of dictators. And can we talk about her obsession with Trump's posturing towards Hamas? Joy frames it as authoritarian, conveniently ignoring that this kind of rhetoric is par for the course in diplomacy. Obama once promised Muammar Gaddafi a day of reckoning, and the Washington Post called it strong leadership. But when Trump warns Hamas of consequences, Joy clutches her pearls and screams, "Tyranny!" Maybe she should look into consistency. It's free. and it makes arguments way more credible. Finally, her claim that Trump is part of a global far-right surge is as overblown as her ego. A Brookings Institute study in 2023 shows that while populism has risen globally, U.S. institutions remain strong with checks and balances firmly in place. But Joy's monologue isn't about nuance, it's about painting Trump as a boogeyman for maximum dramatic effect. If she's so concerned about authoritarianism, maybe she should check her own tactics of cherry-picking, fear-mongering, and over-the-top theatrics. At this rate, the only truth in Joy's atmosphere is a hot air she's filling it with.
Oh, and let's not forget, this is the same Donald Trump who at one point seriously wanted to buy the nation of Greenland, even possibly trade it for Puerto Rico. I wonder what this guy has against Puerto Rico. I'll just keep noodling on it. I'm sure I'll figure it out. Bottom line, this is how Trump operates on the world stage. He acts like he's everybody's boss, like he's the king of the world, which is bad news for basically everybody, unless your name is Vladimir Putin, the boss to Trump's underboss. The question now is, will any other leader stand up to him? And who? Who becomes the leader of the free world when Donald Trump ends Pax Americana as we know it? As Nicholas Grossman writes for The Bulwark, there is no undoing damage in history. It is up to those with power and influence to limit it now, and up to future generations to deal with it later. The post-Cold War international system has serious flaws, but at least there are clear enough rules that charges of hypocrisy mean something. Even rules more honored in the breach will be preferable to the lawlessness Trump's second term could invite.
Joy Reid's take on Donald Trump supposedly ending Pax Americana is a comedy routine disguised as analysis. She paints Trump as a global wrecking ball, yet conveniently ignores the demolition derby happening under her own guy in office. Pax Americana, more like Pax Crumblicana, courtesy of Joe Biden's foreign policy blunders. All that being said, let's talk about these so-called protectors of the global order. Biden's administration has practically written a blank check to Ukraine, $113 billion in aid, weapons, and intelligence, according to the Congressional Research Service. And let's not forget, Biden authorized Ukraine to use U.S. weapons and intel to attack Russia directly, inching us closer to World War III than any president in recent history. Vladimir Putin's nuclear threats aren't inspired by Trump memes. They're a direct response to Biden's proxy war. So much for peace. If this is Pax Americana, it's running on fumes and duct tape. And then there's the Israel-Hamas war. Reid blames Trump for hypothetical chaos while ignoring Biden's 2-for-1 special, funding both sides of the conflict. Biden's administration released $6 billion in frozen Iranian assets just 1 month before the Hamas attacks. Iran, a known backer of Hamas, didn't send that money to open soup kitchens, okay? According to the U.S. Treasury Department, Iran has funneled billions to Hamas over the years. Then, after Hamas launched its assault, Biden sent aid to Israel. If this is Pax Americana, it's more like Pax Ping Pong. America funding everyone while chaos bounces back and forth. Now let's also address Reid's pearl clutching over Trump's jokes. She's really out here acting like a quip about buying Greenland or trading Puerto Rico is some grand threat to world stability. Joy, it's called humor. Look it up. It could help you. Even Justin Trudeau laughed at Trump's jokes, but somehow you treat them like international incidents. If memes and one-liners are foreign policy disasters, then TikTok might actually be running the world. By this logic, Reagan's joke about bombing Russia would have sparked a nuclear winter. Reid trots out Nicholas Grossman's claim that Trump would invite lawlessness in a second term, yet completely ignores the anarchy unfolding under Biden. The withdrawal from Afghanistan was so poorly managed that even Biden's staunchest defenders called it a disaster. Abandoning allies and leaving behind billions in military equipment wasn't just lawlessness. It was borderline negligent. Pax Americana isn't being threatened by Trump's hypothetical policies. It's unraveling under Biden's very real ones right now. So anyway, let's recap. Biden's foreign policy is like a bad buffet. Everything's overcooked, poorly thought out, and leaves you feeling queasy. Reid wants to pin the blame for global chaos on Trump while ignoring that her own guy is the one lighting fires on both sides of every conflict. If Pax Americana is crumbling, maybe the demolition crew is already in the White House. Joy, if you're going to noodle about something, make it this. When you point one finger at Trump, 3 fingers are pointing back at Biden. And those fingers are holding a $6 billion check to Iran. Anyway, speaking of brain rot, next up we have Alex Cooper from the Call Her Daddy podcast, who made some very telling revelations about her election episode with Kamala Harris.
There's a little bit of controversy about that podcast because you did. Do you know about this?
No, what?
Because in D.C., this interview happened in D.C.
Yeah.
In a hotel.
Yeah, not in a hotel. It was like a random house.
It was like random house. But apparently, you can tell me, they spent, meaning the Harris campaign spent like $100,000.
I did see that.
You know about this?
It's hilarious.
To build the studio.
Yeah, that's not true.
Not true. To make it look like it was the studio that you used in L.A.
My studio that is gorgeous in Los Angeles doesn't even cost six figures. So I don't know how cardboard walls could cost six figures, but.
But do you think they did that? I mean, you saw it.
Absolutely not. With love to them. Oh my God, it was gorgeous, but like, it wasn't that nice. It wasn't like gorgeous marble. Like, no, that was not six figures.
Kamala Harris's campaign spending $100,000 to replicate a podcast studio is exactly the kind of out-of-touch, wasteful nonsense we've come to expect from entitled public servants like her. Let's break this down. First of all, $100,000 for a set made of cardboard walls? Are you kidding me? Even Alexa Cooper, who's not exactly a Rhodes Scholar in her analysis here, can see how absurd that is. Her own studio in LA, one she calls gorgeous, didn't cost anywhere near six figures, yet somehow Harris's team managed to blow a small fortune to create a knockoff version in DC. The kicker, it wasn't even a proper studio, it was a random house. At this point, you have to ask, did they outsource this to a toddler with a glue gun? Or is this just another example of government-level incompetence? Now, this isn't just bad optics. It's a glaring example of government mismanagement and entitlement. Harris and her team didn't bat an eye at spending donor money like Monopoly cash because, let's face it, it's not their money. They didn't have to work for it. They didn't sweat to earn it. It's coming out of the pockets of hardworking Americans who are trusting them and investing in her campaign, and who likely can't fathom spending $100,000 on anything, let alone a temporary set that's just used once. When you don't feel the weight of where the money comes from, of course, you're going to treat it like your personal piggy bank. Now, let's extrapolate this mindset to a Harris presidency. If she's willing to shell out six figures for a vanity project like a podcast studio that's used once, what would she do to the U.S. economy? Are we talking about $1 trillion Bloomingdale's Hall here? Maybe a nationwide cardboard walls initiative for the infrastructure plan? This kind of reckless spending isn't just a campaign embarrassment. It's a preview of how she'd treat the American economy like her own personal credit card. Forget balanced budgets. We'd be drowning in debt while Harris debates whether faux marble or actual marble looks better on government-funded projects. And let's not let Alex Cooper off the hook here. Watching her stumble through this interview is like watching someone try to assemble a house of cards during an earthquake. She can barely piece together a coherent thought, yet somehow this vapid commentary was seen as influential during the election cycle. Cooper's shock at the $100,000 price tag is rich, coming from someone whose understanding of value seems to extend only to gorgeous marble, but even she, with all her cluelessness, can spot the absurdity here. That says everything you need to know about how glaring this waste was for Kamala's campaign. This entire situation is a microcosm of everything wrong with entitled public servants and the people who blindly prop them up. Harris's team sees her donors as she sees the taxpayer as an infinite resource to fund her whims, while people like Cooper bumble through interviews astonished by their own discoveries as if they've unearthed the Rosetta Stone. Meanwhile, everyday Americans are footing the bill for the circus. If this is the level of leadership Harris would have brought to the table, it's no wonder people are terrified of her managing anything beyond a podcast set. At least with cardboard walls, the stakes were low. With the U.S. economy, not so much. And speaking of treating the government like your own personal piggy bank, let's move on to Communist-in-Chief AOC, who would love nothing more than to reach into your pocket and take everything out of it so she can fulfill her own dreams for the world.
Years ago, when we first introduced the Green New Deal resolution, it was just resoundingly mocked by the Democratic establishment. Even at that time, then Speaker Pelosi called it the Green Dream. People said it was impossible. People said that it was a laughingstock. But if we fast forward to just several months several months ago, we were able to pressure President Biden into signing an executive order that authorized one of the first steps of the Green New Deal, which is a 20,000 member civilian climate corps. And we now are employing people across all 50 states employing people across the entire country and employing them in everything from installing solar panels on community centers and community health clinics to employing recent college graduates in restoring our federal lands and repopulating mangrove trees everywhere from places like Puerto Rico to the Midwest United States, and really beginning to invest and create an economy that also has opportunities to join a unionized workforce in order to reorganize our economy and essentially have a World War II level federal investment on combating the climate crisis, is what we are starting to accomplish already materially. It is happening. It is in the ground, and it is happening.
AOC's gleeful admission here isn't just astonishing. It's actually not surprising. This is how Democrats work. To sum it up, AOC and her Democrat caucus pressured President Biden into implementing parts of the Green New Deal. First off, let's be clear. This is a policy that Americans didn't vote for. The Green New Deal wasn't on any ballot, and polling consistently shows that a large portion of Americans object to its principles. A 2021 poll by the Competitive Enterprise Institute found that 68% of Americans were concerned about the costs associated with the Green New Deal, with many equating it to a form of economic overreach, even bordering on socialism or communism. Yet here we are with AOC proudly boasting about sneaking parts of it into executive orders. This is a classic Democrat playbook. Bypass Congress, sideline the voters, and push through regulations that expand government bureaucracy at the taxpayers' expense. And by the time taxpayers realize what's happening, oops! Billions of dollars have already been spent, and the gears of government make it nearly impossible to undo. It's like someone secretly signing you up for a luxury gym membership, billing you every month, and then locking the cancellation behind layers of bureaucracy. You didn't ask for it, you didn't want it, but now you're stuck paying for it. According to the New York Times, implementing the full Green New Deal would cost as much as $93 trillion over the next decade. That's not just an expense, it's an economic sinkhole. And who's paying for this? You, the taxpayer, your children, and your grandchildren. This isn't just wasteful, it's generational theft, passing along a crushing debt to future Americans for programs they never consented to. But AOC isn't just talking about solar panels and mangroves, okay? She's boasting about restructuring the economy itself, comparing it to a World War II level federal investment. Let's not forget, the federal government's debt has already surpassed $33 trillion. Throwing more money we don't have into sweeping programs without voter approval is reckless at best and authoritarian at worst. This isn't about saving the planet, it's about consolidating power, creating more government dependency, and expanding unionized bureaucracies that coincidentally align with Democrat Party political interests. And this brings us to the entitlement mentality of leaders like AOC, Kamala Harris. Whether it's AOC's treating the taxpayer like her personal financier for ideological experiments, or Harris blowing $100,000 of her donors' money on cardboard podcast sets, these people see government, and by extension, your hard-earned money, as their piggy bank. They don't think twice about how these expenditures will affect you or future generations, because they won't be the ones footing the bill. They'll be retired, living off taxpayer-funded pensions, while the rest of us and our kids are left drowning in debt. What AOC and her allies don't understand, or maybe don't care about, is that this isn't free money. Every dollar spent on these vanity projects and sweeping reforms comes from the pockets of hard-working Americans who already are struggling to make ends meet. They're not just passing the debt, they're passing the consequences of their entitlement onto people who haven't even been born yet. This isn't leadership. It's theft wrapped in buzzwords like investment and progress. Now, a deeper issue here is accountability, or the lack of it. AOC's boast about pressuring Biden into signing executive orders is a prime example of circumventing the democratic process. Americans didn't vote for this, and the fact that she's so proud of sneaking it under the radar tells you everything you need to know about her priorities. Power first, accountability last. If this is the future of leadership, we're in for a long and expensive ride. And spoiler alert, It's the taxpayers, you and me, not AOC, who will be stuck footing this bill. Anyway, you tell me what you think in the comments down below. Have a terrific day. Peace.